All right, we're just waiting for YouTube to prepare itself.
Okay.
Gotta love technology.
Especially when it works.
And that's the big thing. I seem to be
All
at
right,
war
we
with technology.
we are live.
Good evening and welcome to my podcast. I'm Alan Steinberg, the voice of dynamic political centrism. Tonight, we are having a special live primary election night show. This is a historic night because there's a number of key political questions that will be answered in terms of New Jersey's present politics and its future. I am really fortunate to be have on my show tonight an all-star panel. Many of you, you know, I'm a baseball fan. I have the New York Mets colors on, and you know how I value all-star games. This is an all-star panel, and let me introduce the members of this panel. We will be joined by another panelist at 9:45. First of all, let me introduce my director, who is the king of technology, who does an excellent job and makes these broadcasts possible, Yonatan Yaris. Yoni has a doctorate in education, so we call him Doc. So if I make reference to him as Doc, he's not a medical doctor, but he's an education doctor, which is just as valuable in these troubled times. Next, we have on Brian Thompson, who is a historic, I mean this, he's a historic figure because for many years, he was the voice of New York network television in covering New Jersey. In fact, he was the best at that I ever saw. I always felt there were two deans of television coverage in New Jersey. One was my dear friend Michael Aaron, may he rest in peace, who for years was considered the dean of the State House Press Corps. And the other was Brian Thompson, because not only did he do an excellent job of coverage, his analysis was phenomenal. The average person who was on New York network TV didn't have his insight, didn't have his knowledge of the players. And one of the things that Brian did is he got around and he met everybody. And I first met him when I was the executive director of the Meadowlands Commission. And over the years, we've developed a wonderful relationship. He is very badly missed right now because there's nobody that compares with him in terms of New York television coverage. And because of the lack of coverage, that enables these podcasts to get a new niche. But that's the way it is. But everything is topped off by the fact that I have the two finest legislators of the past 25 years as panelists tonight. We have the finest Democrat legislator in Loretta Weinberg. I want to tell you how I first met Loretta. It was all the way back when you came in after Matty Feldman, I believe, after he left, and
after Byron. Yeah, right.
Byron. But you came to the assembly, and at that time, the Democrats were really demoralized. And you gave them a voice and you gave them enthusiasm that really caused a revival of the whole caucus. And you were distinguished. I've said this a number of times. Loretta is distinguished by real humanitarian feelings. She reaches out to the unfortunate, the discriminated. She's been a voice for the gay community and the right of same-sex marriage. She also has been a voice for the underprivileged, and she's been a true civil libertarian. When she became a senator and she became Senate Majority Leader, it was something that was long overdue. So we have the Ted Williams of the Democrat legislators over the last. Loretta, you got to forgive me. I make baseball analogies all the time.
That's okay.
But then on the Republican side, we have Michael Testa. He is a superb senator, regardless of what your beliefs are. He is a brilliant legislator. He analyzes in real time. He is a conservative, but he is a respected conservative in the sense that he is open-minded. He will analyze problems. He's been by far the most active legislator for the Republicans and effective legislators since they've been in the minority all these years. I expect him to be a future gubernatorial candidate, and if he becomes a governor someday, I hope he'll let me do. I should be in my 80s by then. I should be able to do the podcast from his inaugural ball, and he will still be the best dressed person at that inaugural ball. So it's a delight to have all of you. We will have Julia Sass Rubin join us at 9:45. Julius Ass Rubin wrote the basis for the opinion this year that eliminated the line from the Democratic primary. Michael, answer me this question. I had some confusion as to whether the line was eliminated for the Republican primary as well.
Well, I mean, it absolutely was. So we all had to play by the same set of rules. Whether we've been beneficiaries of the line or not, it's now a bygone era. But I think what this really taught us, this specific primary, is that name recognition really matters. I also believe that the county infrastructures, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, of those county organizations really matter. And from what we can see and glean from tonight's results thus far, are that those candidates who most utilized the county infrastructures throughout our state are coming out on top. On the Republican side, I could tell you that, Bill Spadea and Senator John Bramnick chose not to utilize the county committees, chose not to attend county conventions. And I don't think that helped them in any way, shape, or form. They tried to essentially run a grassroots campaign around the duly elected county committee men and women of each county. And I think they did so to their detriment.
Well, that shows that on the Republican side, the chairs still have power and they still are the effective force in primaries. Loretta, what about the Democrat side? Even though such a big deal was made about the elimination of the line, it seems like this is a pretty good night for the chairs.
I would agree. I would agree with what Senator Testa just outlined in terms of the infrastructure that already exists with both parties, with both Republicans and Democrats. And those candidates who seem to be on the winning side of everything here took advantage of that infrastructure. If I look at my own home county of Bergen County, there are something like 1,200 county committee people who are duly elected in a primary election every 2 years or appointed to openings that might exist for other reasons. That's a big infrastructure. There is a headquarters, there is a fundraising operation, there are events that are held throughout the course of the year. They keep the lights on in the respective Democrat and Republican headquarters. So I think this election proves that it might be more expensive. It might be a little bit more difficult, but the county organizations and the infrastructure they have mean a lot.
Well, you just said it all. And as a matter of fact, I think there's a couple other things I could point to. And then I want to call upon Brian from the media vantage point. I think, I had a meeting with Julia Sass Rubin on this, and she pointed out a few things. Number one, the county chairs still are the bedrock of fundraising in their counties. And, years ago when I was starting off in politics in Camden County, the Lord and Master of Camden County was the late Angelo Ericetti. And, we had a meeting once with him, and they used to call him Eric. Jim Florio later deposed him as the leader of the Democrats in Camden County. But he gave a comment to us. He said, "There ain't no romance without finance." And that's true. That's a line I'll never forget. Okay.
I'm going to write that one down there, Alan. That's fantastic.
Well, yeah, you can tell your followers in Cumberland County that there ain't no romance without finance. But they're also, when it comes to get out the vote, I think that's where infrastructure, I think, makes a real difference. And I don't know what you do. Some people think that you can get out the vote with mayors. I think it's the county chairs. Loretta, what do you think of that?
And again, I go back to infrastructure, but the county chairs have built up voters lists over the years. They have access to computerized voters lists so that they have the infrastructure to go out and knock on doors that are important to them and leave other doors out that are less important to their winning an election. So all of that is there prior to election day. It's organizational skill, and they are really important to our two-party system. So though party organizations have been kind of denigrated over the course of the years, and I was never a believer in 4 mayors sitting in the back room deciding who should win a primary, but I think if it's done in an open and equal way, uh, we have a good structure here in New Jersey. And it would appear from looking at the first returns that have come in that the lack of a line did not mean the lack of good organizational skills winning an election.
Well, you're absolutely right. Thus far, in the Republican side, Jack Ciattarelli has already been projected as the winner of the Republican gubernatorial election. And Doc, I understand that right now, and I'll call on you for some results in a few minutes. I understand that the networks have also projected Mikey Sherrill as the winner of the Democrat nomination. Is that correct?
Correct. And Governor Murphy has already posted on social media congratulating both of the nominees as well.
Okay, well, that's pretty. That's pretty
That's
conclusive.
fast.
Yes, he's not. He wants to go to bed early.
I think he's racing to retirement.
This is similar to Reagan in 1984, isn't it, Alan?
Well, Reagan in '84, I remember how that was projected. It was funny because I campaigned very actively for him. And the night he was, I had a little baby at home, my son. He's now many decades older than that. And I came home and I was watching the returns, and that's when they first started using blue and red. And it was a big red. I think at that time, actually, Republicans were the blue and the Democrats were
They
the red.
were.
Yeah, remember that, Brian? That's great trivia for us to know.
Mm-hmm.
But there was, I remember David Brinkley was looking at the map. He says, we got a deep blue sea there. And then by the time of 8/10, they called the election for Reagan. But this is good for both the nominees as such. But Loretta, I have to ask you another question. You were another thing that was I always admired your career. You started off, as I recall, and I don't say this, I say this positively, not negatively. You were viewed at one time as an outsider, as a reformer, but you still did not antagonize the organization to a degree where you were unacceptable. And once you were nominated, you were a key player. I mean, how did you manage that one?
Well, there were a few people I antagonized along the way, by the way.
Well, it's their fault, not yours, but I always found that amusing.
I have always been a believer, and it goes way back to the 70s, that it is the county committee, the grassroots elected party stalwarts that should be elected in an open primary. Now, of course, everybody's elected in an open primary, and that if we had a democratically elected county organization, they in turn would carry out appropriately how we should behave and pick our candidates, etc. So the rest of the world has caught up, and now there's in essence an open primary. But I always worked within the organization.
Right, you weren't trying to destroy it. You were trying to, become a leader in it. Basically.
Because I knew that it was through the organization was the only way I could accomplish the goals that were important to me. And those things that were important to me were the kind of legislative priorities that I had. Those were the passions, the beliefs, the reason why I got into elected office or tried to get into elected office to begin with. So I always respected the organization. I disagreed. I stood up always sometimes in the back rooms, sometimes having to stand up publicly. But the organization was my home. And that was the rules that I followed. And I think it's appropriate. There's an organization, there's an infrastructure. People are free to go outside it, but I think this election has sent a good message to a lot of people. We'll see what Julia Sass-Rubin says when she analyzes it, because she's pretty much an authority in this area.
Absolutely, but I want to call on Brian next, and then we'll get back to Doc, who has some results from Camden County, which could be significant. But Brian, let me ask you this. You always knew what issue was significant and what was not. there's a certain herd instinct I find in New Jersey political media, where if one of the people with stature starts covering it, everybody just goes nuts and starts to follow the same issue without some independent thinking. That was never a fault of yours. But let me ask you something, and I'm not asking you to trash your, now you're retired, I'm not asking you to trash those who are in the field. But I know I feel this way. I think that the media in New Jersey gave far too much attention to the line. And it's amazing how they disregarded the chair's power to raise money, the chair's power of infrastructure. That's actually a better word than just GOTV. And I thank you, Michael, for submitting that. What's your view of how the media covered this election, particularly the New York media you used to be a part of?
Well, yeah, as far as TV is concerned, you're talking about New York media for 2/3 of the state, 3/4 of the state, I suppose, and 1/3 would be the Philadelphia media. So they're both out of state. They both have people who don't fully. There have been a handful of reporters for those stations who did understand what was going on. They were assigned to cover New Jersey, but a lot of them wanted to be in New York. Their heart was not in New Jersey, so it was easy just to look at what was going on with the line, whatever, and kind of make it a horse race like that. I think you had to. What I tried to do was dig down a little deeper and break up New Jersey into its components, into its parts. And, sometimes it would be the women's vote. Sometimes it would be the rural vote. Sometimes it would be, I loved the mountain men up in Warren and Suffolk County.
He got around, believe me. I know how he was traveling. Go ahead.
Yeah, I know. And then, of course, South Jersey is a whole different animal, as the senator well knows. We're seeing Cumberland County. It used to be solid Democrat. Now it's more red than purple, I guess you could say.
Well, he's the guy that did it too.
There you go. So kudos to him. But this is a sort of, I guess you could say, a texture that most reporters who are parachuting in don't really understand. And living here and covering this state, it was a joy to cover, quite frankly, in my 27 years of doing it. I loved it.
Well, you made it comprehensible. And I think that now that there's really no one identified with network television in New Jersey, I think it's a problem. I really think it is, because the other thing is that you were able, I remember some of the spots, I shouldn't even use the word spots, segments that you filmed. I remember the segment of you chasing Tom King Jr. with him running away from you. He may well lose next year. He's in a very, he voted for all the Trump Medicaid eliminations, which I think is going to really hurt him. So if you unretire and you show up when he's giving a speech, I think he's going to turn blue. He ran away from Brian. I'll never forget this. He ran away from him and ran down the elevator. And I think it was a classic moment in New Jersey political history. But
yeah, well, and he's still running.
That's very true. That's very true. And whoever his opponent's going to be is a big story. Michael, you don't have to worry about him as a senator anymore, but you may be called upon for assistance as to whoever is going to, if he is running again, and he will need people like yourself, because that's going to be, I think, the most hotly contested race next year. But Brian, when you were, you've never stopped observing New Jersey.
No.
I know that. You and I talk a lot. When you were seeing all this coverage of the line, did you think it was overdone?
To say it was overdone was, I think, to miss the point. It was, it didn't have the nitty gritty of really getting New Jersey. Yes, the line was important. Yes, the line in many cases ruled the roost, but it didn't show the various divisions in the state. It didn't show basically how New Jersey was starting to change. And we see that now with Senator Kim's successful overthrow of the line a couple of years back. And you know, today now it's not every man for himself, every woman for herself, but it certainly makes it very interesting. You know, I'm just, I know Yoni has some information, but I'm just looking right now with 30%, 31% of the vote in for the General Assembly 32nd Legislative District, which is Hudson County, where you have 6 candidates, 3 different slates, one incumbent on each of 2 slates. And the slate that's winning right now has no incumbents, and that includes Mayor Bala. But even Mayor Bala is only in second of Hoboken. He's only in second place to guess who?
Brennan.
Katie Brennan, the woman who
Wow.
tried to call out
For the
sexual
sexual
assault
harassment and everything. Oh, wow.
Oh,
in
yes,
the
I
Murphy
remember. I remember
administration.
Katie Brennan.
Well,
Mhm.
weren't you in charge of that committee?
Ah,
Loretta, I
yes,
think you were.
yes, yes, indeed, Alan. I was the co-chair.
Yes,
So
you
Yes,
were.
you will welcome her to Trenton with open arms.
absolutely.
Well, she's
Well,
now
I think she's
leading.
got to go ahead, Brian. I'm sorry.
He is now leading in first place with about almost a third of the votes in Hudson County in that particular district by a couple hundred votes over Mayor Bala from Hoboken, and by about the same margin over the incumbent Jessica Ramirez.
That is unique and that is historic. I think Katie Brennan has the potential of being a real political star.
Yes,
Yeah.
she does. She has all the qualities. She is articulate. The camera loves her. She is passionate about her own set of goals and beliefs. So I think she combines a lot, and I think Trenton is going to be very much aware of her if she's elected to the assembly.
Well, I thought it was remarkable. Look, there's nothing, there are few things worse for people in public life than to have been victimized. And it's true, it's a terrible thing of anyone who's been victimized. But here she was in public life. She had to answer a lot of questions.
Mhm.
And the way she held up with such poise, I thought was remarkable. And I said at that time, if this woman survives all this, I didn't know if she was ever going to run for office, but I said she has the makings of a political star. And I think that tonight opens a new chapter in new politics. It may be the chapter of Katie Brennan. It could be, and that's something. So, Yoni, Doc, what kind of returns do you have right now that you can
So
share with us in
to
Camden
run
County?
counter against the having well-organized structure and a shocker right now, it appears that the progressives are going to unseat the entire Cherry Hill slate for the county in
Wow.
Camden.
That's huge.
Mm.
Hey, that's good. Doc, you can become a reporter. That is huge. Didn't they win? Was that the Collingswood slate or is that the whole
Collingwood
county?
slate won, and they just didn't know how to play with it. I'm friendly with one of the members of the slate, and I can say without a certain that Dave Stahl will know how to play better than the Collingswood people did. So this will get very interesting.
So is this a slate for the whole county or is this
So
a
for Cherry Hill, the Cherry Hill portion of it.
that is, oh boy, that's my
So
You're
deal.
talking.
is that local candidates in Cherry Hill?
So So the interesting side story of this,
Let's answer Loretta's question. Isn't that a slate for county committee?
yes.
Okay, go
Okay.
ahead, keep going. Loretta,
This,
that's huge.
yeah, so Pam Lampett refused to make it oval, so each person would be voting on their own. She required it to be a slate for the Cherry Hill portion of the Camden County. And that was completely tarred and feathered. And a lot of people came out and voted against that as a protest of that decision because it went against the court hearing that we're
Hmm.
not supposed to have lines anymore. At last check, the progressives have 3,784 votes. The Camden County Democratic Committee, which half of the members are on council, married to council people, grandparents of council people, only has 2,090 votes.
Wow.
Well, how does that affect? I have developed. This surprises people. I've developed a real soft spot for George Norcross because he's a real friend. That shocks people because I used to be one of the biggest critics, but he has really developed a strong. Israel's a big issue with me, and he's been a real staunch supporter to the extent that he even put a flag of Israel up on one of his buildings in Camden County, and his son converted to Judaism and and they had an Orthodox wedding ceremony. So George has a life other than just politics.
I didn't know that, by the way. That's interesting.
Very interesting.
And-
No, he is a.
And Alan, he also put the flag of Israel up at the Philadelphia Eagles game, if you saw
I
that.
remember he was with Chris Christie that night, and he almost got thrown out because they said to George he couldn't hang it up over the rail. But this is a difficult time for our community, and I have to applaud him for that. I have no choice but to applaud for that. But how does this affect Yoni? How do you think you lived down? I lived in Camden County for some years, but you lived down there. How do you think? Don't worry, we're protecting you. How do you think this affects George's stature
Well,
in the county?
Cherry Hill has the largest number of seats. You're now talking about three people who are now going to sit together and appoint the rest of the committee.
So
that is a complete sea change because you're talking about the majority of votes. This becomes very interesting for the next cycle, in terms of who they go for.
How does this affect Lou Greenwald?
They're good for now because he's already on this. He's got it for this one, but it impacts if I'm Jim Beach. I'm worried about my seat,
right?
Because he's not.
No, I like Jim. That's but I guess he's in the crowd. But that is the biggest. You talk about a change in infrastructure, given the fact that Loretta and Mike both alluded to that.
Well, Yoni,
that's a massive change.
I don't quite understand. If you could explain a little bit more about the local.
Go ahead, Yoni.
Issue.
Sure.
Yeah.
So
what was this? Yeah.
So this was the one election was voted on in the old school manner of a slate, effectively having a line. So they
made a slate of county committee people.
Correct. So it was winner take all. So the progressives only put up 3 people against a full completed slate from the machine, effectively. The 3-person slate has now effectively won. I don't see there's a way of them being overtaken in same day and election day voters because Cherry Hill is beyond a vote by mail town. I can tell you, having watched the last several school board meetings, when vote by mail drops, the election's over.
Wow.
So those 3 people now appoint the rest of the
correct
committee?
Yes, from my understanding. I'd have to read the bylaws. But that would be my impression, is they now get to fill the rest of the seats.
So that is you think that somebody's going to emerge? I know Sue Altman was involved in a lot of the races in Camden County involving county committee spots. I don't think she's so involved now, but is there a leader? Do the insurgents have a leader?
It's hard to say. I'd be speaking out of turn if I could say for true or not who they have, but it'll be interesting. I do think they're going to do a better job in Cherry Hill than they did in Collingswood. I think they learned a lot of important lessons from that. Because I think Collingswood, they just didn't know. But I think having Cherry Hill, that's the whole shebang. That is Camden County.
No, Cherry Hill is. I'll tell you something. I remember when my aunt and my uncle of blessed memory, they were in Pittsburgh. My uncle became the head of the Fort Dix commissary. So they moved to what was then Delaware Township. That's what Cherry Hill was in those days. And then it became Cherry Hill, I think, around 1964. But in those days, it was interesting because the Jewish community was mostly located in Camden. And the people who lived in Cherry Hill at that time, this is interesting, were mostly young, upwardly mobile people seeking to get ahead. But the wealthier Jewish community lived in Camden. And I'll never forget what Jim Florio once told me. He said, Alan, I will always consider myself a resident of Camden. It was a great city then, Camden. But when the riots occurred, when the racial disturbances occurred, the Jewish community moved out overnight. A number of the other communities moved out, and that was it for Camden. So the return of Camden is something that I still hope happens. I used to talk about this with Jim often because it was a marvelous city. But back to you, Brian. At one time, New Jersey, my favorite book on New Jersey politics was written by a dear friend of mine. I'm sure Loretta's familiar with him, and Michael, you're probably familiar with him too. Steve Salmore, the late Steve Salmore. And he wrote the book, New Jersey, and with his wife, who is a terrific lady, Barbara Salmore, and they wrote the book New Jersey Government and Politics, Suburban Politics Comes of Age. In those days, you had in New Jersey, and this is a radical change from now, you had what was called the Big Six. You had the Big Six cities. Camden was one of them. Trenton was another one. Patterson was one. Newark and Jersey City was another one. And I'm lost for a minute as to what the sixth city was.
Maybe Elizabeth
What? Elizabeth, right. Boy, you're good, Brian.
for a newbie.
No, you're good. But in those days, the suburbs were mostly Republican. The Democrats would win the elections statewide because of the cities. I don't think that exists at all anymore. And I think places like you have some suburbs that are bigger than the cities. What is your take on that? I don't see much of a suburban urban divide as it used to be, except when education funding, that's where it comes up.
Yeah, I mean, you look at some place like Somerset County, which has really flipped Democrat over the past few years, and there is, no there as far as the city is concerned. It's just all exurbia more than suburbia, but it has managed to flip to the Democrats. You look at Essex County, all of the inner ring suburbs, be they Maplewood or Montclair, for the most part, they've gone Democrat and boosted that. Bergen County it's only in the last, I don't know, decade or so, maybe a little bit longer, that it is convincingly gone Democrat. I remember they used to have a Republican county executive there.
I remember that.
It's not that long ago, Loretta. I remember. Well, Christy Whitman was the freeholder director there at one point.
No, not in Bergen.
Not in
What's
Bergen.
that?
Hunterdon, probably.
I thought you was talking about Somerset. I'm sorry.
Well, I switched to Bergen.
Okay.
Okay.
My bad.
The Republicans have really gone south and west and northwest, I'd say is the safest way. Passaic used to be pretty solid Republican. Then it hit Democrat pretty hard. Now it's more purple, as we saw in the last presidential election. But it's hard to gauge what's going to happen to Passaic County right now. But you got your strongholds of Monmouth and Ocean. I think Burlington is kind of on the cusp of being a fairly reliable Republican county. It just depends on what the race is and what they're voting for. Gloucester, mentioned the senator and his success in Cumberland County. So it's, you're seeing all these demographic shifts. You see all these people move out of New Jersey, and we're supposed to be we are apparently one of the top states for people moving out of, and yet our population has grown for the last couple of census takes by people coming in, whether they're from New York or whether they're just immigrants from other countries, the Indian population into the Edison, South Brunswick population, Muslims coming in from the Arab world or Egypt or whatever. It's kind of hard now to just label this part of New Jersey is Republican and that part is Democrat, and the rings are all Republican, or even that the immigrants are all Democrats. It's so mixed up right now. It's like a huge stew, I guess you could say, of ethnicity, income, regionalism, and that's what makes it interesting for us.
It makes it fascinating, but I want to come back to this because you mentioned Passaic County, and now I'm going to give out a hot rumor, but you may have heard this one already. Supposedly, Jack Ciattarelli is leaning for his lieutenant governor pick to pick Kristen Corrado, a senator who represents, Passaic County. I thought that he might lean towards someone from Loretta's County. I thought he might lean towards Holly Shapizi, because I don't think the Republicans, they're going to have to win Bergen County to defeat Sherrill. but I was somewhat surprised. And this rumor seems to have some legs. What's your feeling about that? I mean, they won Passaic. Trump won Passaic, so maybe the Republicans are banking on Passaic pretty heavily this November.
No question, it's a challenge for Democrats. Trump showed that New Jersey is potentially ripe for the plucking for Citarelli. And yeah, he's got to do really well in Bergen County. You know, Holly kept teasing the idea that she wanted to run for governor herself. I don't know that she really wants to play second fiddle to a job that really has no responsibility. She's come a long way. She, beat a medical condition and still came back. That's not my take of Holly, that she'd be happy as a lieutenant governor. I mean, we saw what happened to Kim Guadagno under Christie.
Kim ran against Loretta. And Loretta, I always felt during that whole campaign, I mean, you were Corzine's pick, but you were very relaxed about the whole thing. I never felt it wasn't one of your great ambitions to become lieutenant governor.
Yeah, but I had a great deal of fun in that campaign. As I said to everybody, it was a lot of fun for me, except the losing part. But I said I didn't have to worry about raising money. I didn't have to worry about staffing a campaign. They came and picked me up every morning. I'd go and make speeches. People would applaud, and we'd go to the next spot. So for me,
you had a lot of energy. I remember that.
For me, it was a great experience. That too, when I learned there's a whole state south of Trenton. I used to think Trenton was South Jersey. From where
you're not alone.
And I found out there's a whole state down there. So it was a great learning experience. I loved it. And by the way, the Democratic ticket, not by much, but we carried Bergen County. It did not go Republican.
Well, that's a credit to you.
Yeah, okay. And I will take a bow on that. I think it was.
Good.
So, as I said, we didn't win it by much, but it was in the Democratic column, although Chris Christie carried the state of New Jersey, of course. So, yeah, I was pretty relaxed in that campaign, and I treasure the opportunity that John Corzine gave me to really learn a lot about New Jersey and about the great people who live here. And when Brian talked a little earlier about the kind of big melting pot we are, I live in Teaneck. I've lived in Teaneck a good portion of my adult life. It's where I work, and it's the community I love. We have everything here from a mikveh to a mosque.
And that is a great saying, from a mikveh to a mosque.
And
that's better than saying that I donated before about no romance without finance. I'm going to take that one to shul with me tomorrow.
Well, you certainly can. And as I said, that exists right here in Teaneck. And so it's the kind, we have this wonderful stew of Muslim population, traditional Jewish, Orthodox Jewish. The rest of the Jewish community is represented by the other congregations that are here, a Latino community, and certainly a large African American community. So it's a privilege to live in a community like this, to grow up in a community like this. But the people of New Jersey are fabulous. And
this is a great state.
That's the best thing I learned in running for lieutenant governor with John Corzine. It was a great experience. I wouldn't have traded it for anything except winning.
Well, that's well said. But before I get over to Mike, because I want him to comment also on the significance that a lieutenant governor candidate may have or may not have on a race. But right now, I want to call on Yoni Yaris. But he has some interesting observations and surprises. Even though Mikey's going to win tonight, there are some variations in the returns that were not expected. Yoni, are these final or are these tentative? Tell us what you have.
So I'll start with Camden County because I got to be biased for South Jersey as a lifer of South Jersey. They are at 77% of the votes counted. So with that in mind, Mikey Sherrill is at 24.1% of the vote. Steve Sweeney is at 23.9. But what's really the surprise for me is that Sean Spiller is running at 23.3%.
That is a surprise.
That is, I believe that is the strongest county showing. I believe there's going to need to be inroads made to NJEA by Mikey Sherrill because she's going to need to bring those votes with her. To be able to win in November, she's going to need to sit down and make nice. I think she'll have an easier time with that with Sean Spiller, whereas I think sitting with Philip, I agree, went against the grain. He pissed off like Andrew Katz. He said he wasn't going to run somebody against her, ran somebody against her, and things like that. So I think that loyalty is going to come into mind. And then the other big news coming out of Essex is that Ras Baraka now has a sizable lead over Mikey there.
That is shocking because what I thought was I thought that Newark wasn't going to produce a big vote. So if he's obviously he's gotten some suburban vote too. That's really surprising. I'm not challenging you on what I said, but what is the percentage voting? I will really be shocked if
Yoni, do you know where the vote came from in Essex?
I will start digging more into that when I get to their page. I will give that to you in my next update. They're at 79%, with Ras Baraka at just shy of 31,000 and Mikey sitting at, I'll give her just shy of 28.
Wow.
So that's sizable margins.
That is a huge wow, because I know, that means that Baraka did better. Well, I'm going to turn this over to Brian because he always knew the suburban urban divide. But Brian, I'm saying this laudatory wise to Baraka. He was viewed as not being able to reach out to the suburbs. What is his statewide total? Do you know what his percentage is? What is the statewide? Let's get the statewide lineup with our next report as to what the percentages for Cheryl, what it is for Fulop, and everybody else. But that is Brian. I'm amazed at the statewide that kind of breakdown with the in the suburbs. If that holds up, I think it's going to be a healthy development. I like to see African American candidates do better in the suburbs. Mike Testa made a significant advance on this when he had his assembly running mate as an African American, and they all said that violates conventional wisdom. It's in South Jersey, and Mike and his running mate were successful. But Brian, tell me, what do you read into that? I'm shocked.
Well, I think what you're going to see is, Baraka was a superb candidate. There's no question about it.
And he was a superb mayor, by the way.
I would agree with you. But he was a great candidate. He had a certain burden of being, African American mayor of an African American city, and that didn't play as well in the suburbs as he would have hoped. Mikey Sherrill is the one who played well in the suburbs. I think what you're going to see is basically close to a three-way battle for second place. But of course, that doesn't win you anything. But I think Baraka and Fulop, and I'm leaning toward maybe Spiller as close in there with the second place running, excuse me.
So you see Gottheimer finishing below them?
Way below.
That's interesting because he did very well in some of the Jewish communities. He did very well in Lakewood. Oh, we see that Julia is coming on. Julia, you're with us. Welcome, Julia Sass Rubin. Now we have we have eminent legislators. We have the king of New York, New Jersey media, the retired king, and now we have the absolute eminent from academia, Julia Sass Rubin. Welcome. It is an honor for us to have you here. We were reading some figures, and it's a perfect time for you to arrive because Yoni, Doc Yaris, gave us some figures saying that in Essex County, that Baraka is ahead. That is absolutely unreal, and also that in Camden County, that Cheryl's ahead. I mean, the machine in Camden County, they're going to have a lot of gnashing of teeth to do. Where's Loretta? I don't see her. There she
I'm
is.
here.
Okay, I don't want to lose Loretta. Otherwise,
There are five Democratic counties and 3 Republican counties where the winner so far, it might change, is not the endorsed
Not endorsed.
that is
for
incredible.
governor. No.
Which Republican counties, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, basically,
Not yours. You're fine.
You still have a job.
this is only for governor, right?
Right.
So it's the counties where Chitterelli was not endorsed. So it's Ocean, it's Camden, and it's Morris.
Okay.
Well,
He's
who won
winning
those
everywhere.
counties?
What's
Did Bramnick win Morris?
No, everything is going to Chitterelli. But Bramnick was endorsed in Morris,
Oh,
and
okay.
Spadia got Ocean and Camden, and then of course they split Mercer, so I'm not looking at that at all.
So basically, those counties all went for Chitterelli.
Overwhelmingly. And on the Democratic side, there are 5 counties. So the South, Atlantic, Burlington, Camden, and that's going back and forth, but so far, and Cumberland, none of them went for Sweeney as of right now. That could change, obviously. And he was endorsed in all of them. And additionally, Baraka retook the lead in Essex. Let's see how long it's still a little bit early, but that's with 85% of the vote in.
Yeah,
And
but
that
that's
was
getting
Carroll
late. It's like
endorsed county.
Yogi Berra used to say, it gets late early out there. You
Right.
know? So it's getting later, but it's at 85%. That's unreal. Do you have any breakdown of where those votes came from? Suburbs or Newark?
No, not yet. We'll have it hopefully tomorrow. But the fact that, just to put it in perspective as to how rare this is, I'm sure I'm speaking to the choir here, but to have 8 counties not go the way of the endorsement, the last time when you think about people on the county line, in the last 20 years, 3 counties for governor that had a county line did not go the way of the endorsement.
Only 3 times?
If you had a county line, not counting Salem, not counting Sussex, right? Because
Right.
that's a ballot like the one we have today.
Right.
But for counties that had a county line, which is basically everyone else except Morris pre-2021 for the Republicans and Warren pre-2017. Salem and Sussex, those are the only ones, except for 2020. We had a couple more because of the special election. So in 20 years, essentially, of all the counties that had the county line, which is everybody else, there were 3 instances where the person on the line did not win, and they were all really close, and they were all Republican primaries in democratically controlled counties. So you'd have a weaker county organization, right? Middlesex, that's not a
Sure.
strong Republican organization. Here, what we're seeing is Camden. I mean, you all know what that means, right? When the Democrats
Yes,
in
we
Camden
do.
cannot elect Sweeney. Essex, very strong organization. So it feels like New Jersey is turning into other states in terms of our elections actually reflecting things like the quality of the candidate and ballot position. I'm seeing some evidence of ballot position.
Dr. Rubin, can I ask a
Now,
question?
please jump
I'm
in,
going to
please.
interject because there was a great discussion, and Senator Weinberg made a great point about infrastructure and certain counties like hers on the Democrat side in Bergen County, mine on the Republican side in Cumberland County, that we actually have open conventions where the duly elected county committee people select their candidate after a process with a secret ballot. And I don't know whether Bergen has a screening committee or not, but that, and obviously screening committees sometimes make a recommendation to the county committee. Mine does not, because typically we require our candidates to come to some of our events. Is what you're seeing, at least, and I'll use Ocean and Camden County, for example, on the Republican side, which would obviously I'm much more intimately familiar.
And Ocean's a great example, right? It's just like Camden on the Democratic side. Like they should be able to get their guy in.
Except in Lakewood, you had a huge, Lakewood is a Jewish town where the Orthodox rabbinate They called it Das Torah town. Whoever the Vad, the rabbinical, I've appeared in front of them with candidates, and I found that these rabbis knew more about politics than I did. Okay.
Yeah, and Alan, to a point though, those counties on the Republican side do not have open conventions.
Right.
The
So the Vad,
chairperson,
go ahead,
the
I'm sorry.
chairperson selects the candidate, which to me, I think what we're seeing is, at least from my perspective, Dr. Rubin, that in counties where you actually have and respect the structure of what the old county system was, and I think still remains with having the duly elected county committee people, they're respecting that choice. But counties where the candidate is just hand selected by, to use Senator Weinberg's prior example of a few people in a smoke-filled back room, I think is what she said, picking the candidate, people don't like that. I think that era is over.
It may also be, I think you're right. I think it may also be that when you have a convention, you're going to get the kind of candidate that's more appealing to the broader population, right? Because the committee members are meant to represent their constituents. And if you don't have, as you said, if the chair is not just forcing their candidate, then you're more likely to get the candidate that's going to win the primary.
Yeah.
If you don't
This
have
is
voters misled with a ballot, if they're actually able to choose.
Well, this is an interesting synthesis, and I want any of you to correct me if you think I'm wrong. There seems to be a synthesis. The point was made by Loretta and Michael that the value of the chair, and you made this point with me when you and I met, when I asked you, without the line, what is the real power of the chair? All of you seem in agreement that if there is a good infrastructure, that the county chair can still have a big influence. I think Middlesex County is a example of that because they have. Brian, you think I'm right about that?
Oh,
I saw you give.
if you have, and even a mayor can make a difference if he's like Chris Bolwich in Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, yes, he's a good friend.
if you have the mass, and if you have, or a Brian Stack in Union City is another example. Jersey City was not quite so malleable for Steve Fulop. Bayonne is kind of up and down, although I just saw where Jimmy Davis, the mayor of Bayonne, just declared victory over the incumbent sheriff of Hudson County. So you got this big mix of things, and I think it was Senator Testa who mentioned some of the disparities across the state. But there are places where being in power as a public official can still make a difference. And that's, that kind of balances out the VOD, for example, in Lakewood, where it's,
Right.
It's not so much the public officials, but it's the Jewish community. So you still have those pockets in the state, and they can make a difference come election day, no matter how hard you campaign.
Well, Julie has some more figures from us from other races. This is turning into a fascinating night, and I couldn't have a better panel with me. But go ahead, Julia, let it roll.
I'm just double checking if anything's changed, but as of 5 minutes ago, we had 3 assembly candidates that were not endorsed that were actually in districts where they could win the general. There were more than that who were winning, but in the 31st and the 32nd, you have Brennan and Bala, and I'm just checking again to see if they're still leading, but yeah, they are ahead. And in the 31st, might have changed. This is the challenge with calling it so early. So it was
That's okay. You're
Stamata.
doing fine. You're like vote profile
Yeah,
analysis,
yeah. So Stamata did not have the endorsement, even though Stamata's an incumbent.
Barbara Stamato?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I believe so. So that's another one where it's off the endorsement cycle. But the 32nd, of course, was a 3-way split on the Democratic side. There were 3 different slates running, and the unendorsed slate is leading right now. It's still pretty close, so it's a little bit early, but that's also really interesting.
What about the 32nd? That is the district also? That's Brian Stack's district.
I think that's more, my goodness, Jersey City.
Right.
Yeah, tax district. The he got Weinstein.
Yeah, Larry
I-
Weinstein, yes.
and that was Mayor Sacco's nemesis in North Bergen. That split happened a few years ago between Stack and Sacco, but that's going to be a very interesting fallout to see if how bad that blood is. Alan, I wanted to ask Senator Tesla something though.
Sure, go ahead, go right ahead.
And if I can play my reporter role, Senator,
Sure.
but
You look young enough to still do that, so go ahead.
we're seeing a lot of fractions in the Democratic Party. The Republican Party has pretty much coalesced around the whole Trump effect right now. And even though Spadea tried to, go off on his thing and he tried to get Trump's endorsement and bragged about his closeness to Trump and everything, excuse me, but we're not seeing in these down ballot races the kind of challenges in some districts that on the Republican side that we're seeing on the Democratic side. And I'm just wondering if you had any insight on that.
I want him to answer that, but I want Loretta to answer that after Michael answers it. Go ahead, Michael.
Sure. What do you mean by challenges down ballot?
Take for example the Jersey City district where Bala and Katie Brennan are ahead. There were 3 slates there, and we always thought it would be very competitive. You take a look at, for example, the Union City and North Bergen, 2 different slates, and that's where the line is really fractured. And showing that fracture where different parts of the Democratic Party can show their split. I'm not seeing it that much in, down ballot, that is instead of the governor's race, for the legislative races.
You mean in the Republican side?
On the Republican side.
Look, I think that the Republicans that we have in office are doing their very best to hold the line. I mean, look, Senator Weinberg and company have been able to have a very large majority for a while. I think that as a party, we've, at least done our very best to follow Ronald Reagan's 80% rule that, hey, listen, if we're agreeing with each other 80% of the time, we're friends, not foes. But look, I think there's always something bubbling underneath. Let's be honest, this is politics, and this is a game where there's folks who have very large egos, some of which they haven't deserved at all, but they believe that they deserve their time in the limelight and want to see their name up in lights somewhere. But look, I'll use an example of, my assembly mates, Eric Simonson and Antoine McClellan. We flipped the first legislative district in 2019. They are great at what they do. Antoine has such a great history in Ocean City, serving at multiple levels at the school board and just being a volunteer coach. You have Eric Simonson, who's an educator, was originally in special education, ultimately became the mayor of Lower Township, one of our larger municipalities. I think it comes down to the fact that candidates really matter. And on the Democrat side, I think that a lot of what you're seeing is a challenge to the party boss system, not the open convention that Senator Weinberg spoke about, having a true open convention and a secret ballot process. When you see 3 slates, it's probably because, look, you had Mayor Fulop who decided to work around the party system and infrastructure completely, which I think was done to his detriment. I'm not really sure what the thought process was there. But then when you see another slate, usually that slate is formed as an anti-slate of, hey, we're done with this party boss system. The line isn't there anymore. And oh, by the way, I'm willing to bet in those counties, and I don't know this because I haven't studied it, and certainly Senator Weinberg could chime in those counties that don't have an open convention with a secret ballot, or look, in some counties they even have true voting booths. They have voting booths. If I'm willing to bet where you've seen those challenges, neither of those are present, and it is a party boss system where you have 3 individuals, maybe the chairman and a couple of mayors meeting in the back room deciding who the candidates are going to be.
Well, of course, there's always there's an exception to that rule, Mike. In Bergen County, we have three slates. We have the endorsed slate of incumbents who based on early returns, seemed to be leading. We had the slate put in by Steve Fulop, and then we had another slate representing, I'm not quite sure what, but but there were
That's a good way of describing it.
there were three slates, two of whom, two of the non-endorsed slates, non-county endorsed slates, there was an Orthodox Jewish person on each of those two slates. So it's kind of interesting to look at. So in spite of the open convention, in spite of the secret ballot, other people ran. But it, as I say, based on early returns, Julia, I don't know if you've seen anything else, Dr. Rubin, in legislative district 37, but the incumbents seem to be leading.
Go ahead, Julia. I can't hear you. Julia?
Sorry,
Hello?
of course, every Zoom call, somebody has to say you're muted, right? That's sort of the rule of law.
After 5 years, none of us are perfect with this, though. It doesn't
I'm the
matter.
worst.
After 5 years, none of us are perfect.
I have a granddaughter, God bless her, who is 10 years old, and she's better with high tech than I am. As Yoni has told me, Alan, you're often at war with high tech. But Julia has something very shocking. I don't use that in a bad way to report. Another county for Baraka thus far. Julia, go ahead.
Yeah, so Union is now Baraka's leading, and that was, of course, a Cheryl endorsement. So that brings to 9 the number of counties between the Democrats and Republicans where the endorsed candidate is not winning. Of course, things change.
That's where the county leader is the Senate president. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah, Nick Scuteri, yes.
Yeah.
I'm in shock over this, not in a bad way. It makes for an exciting matter to cover, but I'm just wondering. Well, Brian, let me take a leap of faith. Suppose Cheryl loses the election this fall, with Baraka surprisingly carrying Essex and Union. He's in a position, if there's a vacancy in 4 years, to run again and really have a strong case, in my view.
You know, I hadn't even thought of that possibility, Alan. You
Only I think of these outside the box things.
outside the batter's box, Alan.
We haven't gotten through this election. He's planning the next one from 4 years.
Well, Loretta, I'm always ahead. I make wrong predictions, but I always think ahead. Go ahead, Brian.
I think Baraka could be in a position to try again. He's young enough. You know, he has a lot of work to do. He started hinting to me maybe 3 years ago that he wanted to run for governor, but he didn't. I didn't see a lot of groundwork until maybe the last year and a half or so, and by that point, I was on the outside looking in. So I can't vouchsafe on that. But that being said, the headwinds that he was facing were tremendous, and that includes the fact that Fulop was the first one out of the gate, and Fulop and Baraka were, joined at the hip sometimes on these urban issues. Then Spiller jumps in from Essex County and Montclair. Although I have to correct myself, Spiller is not going to be in the race for second place from the results I'm seeing now.
Well, who is and how does it stand now for first, second, and third? Do we have any?
Got that. I have it.
Okay. Go ahead.
Give me 1 second to get back to. I was looking at the assembly races because
this is remarkable, regardless of the fact that Cheryl is the front runner wins. This is still remarkable. Go ahead. You have Baraka in second, Julia.
Yeah, I've got. So it's right now we've got Cheryl with 34.3% of the vote. Baraka's at 19.4%. Phillips.
That's kind of a landslide victory for her, actually.
Yeah, that's the side. I think what gets interesting is had Baraka and Philip, one of them not been in, what would have happened to the race? I think they split a very similar base.
Yeah, I was going to make that point that if you combine the progressive candidates, they overwhelmingly, or people who ran as progressives, they would overwhelmingly win. Because I would argue Spiller is also is running as a progressive, right? So just Fulop and Baraka would already exceed Cheryl's vote share. If you add in Spiller, you're ahead by quite a bit.
So they made a bad mistake by not trying to reach an agreement. Yeah. From the progressive point of view, they would have been better off. At least
Alan, I think a point we need to speak about, though, is how much the NJEA was willing to put into
Yes.
oh, absolutely.
what was going to be an utterly doomed campaign from the start. I mean, you think about over $40 million. And, you know, I don't mean to put words in Senator Weinberg's mouth. She's been a fantastic mouthpiece for all the years that she was in Trenton, for sure. Even if we disagreed on the issue, she articulated her position
I
exceedingly
would say she was
well.
a fantastic spokesperson.
Absolutely, and she loved to make motions to table whenever I had something I wanted to say, and I appreciate that, Senator.
Well, it takes a tough combatant to go against you, so
Listen, she was
complimented, damn it.
more than well equipped. But you know, you look at all of the towns that have faced some massive cuts in education, and you look at what I think is really a vanity campaign from Spiller. And all of the money that the NJEA, an education association, spent on an utterly failure of a campaign, if they would have sent some of that money to help some of the really hurting school districts throughout our state on, you know, forget about politics. You know, this isn't something that's
No, you're not wrong.
bipartisan. Education should be nonpartisan. It shouldn't even be bipartisan. And you look at some of the districts that have faced 50% cuts, 70% cuts, like Dennis Township and Cape May County. $1 million would change their entire multiple years, actually, but it would certainly put them in a much better position. And they spent over $40 million on a failed primary campaign. And they should be ashamed of themselves.
I concur. But Julia has an announcement that, Michael, you better sit down. You better stay seated. Because
Okay.
when you hear this announcement, go ahead, Julia. This one is meant for you,
in terms
Michael.
of Cumberland, so Sean Spiller's actually ahead in Cumberland right now. He's been leading there all night. So it's only about 59% of the vote, I think, that's in, 56%, something like that. So it could still change because it's relatively close.
Well, who's in second? Baraka?
No, I believe Sweeney.
You sent me a message about Baraka's ahead in another county,
He's in Union and Essex. He's winning those two.
which is surprising in itself. Yeah. Yes.
Are there any results in from Bergen?
Yeah, Bergen has been called for Gottheimer,
Okay.
or it's not close. He's leading with 40. Excuse me, my computer is choosing to be difficult. Something like 37% right now, with Cheryl in 23% and 95% of the voting. So it's his.
I think the other story from tonight is I think this is the nail in the coffin for Steve Sweeney in Democratic politics.
Mm-hmm.
It's really sad because he was, in my view, the greatest Senate president of my lifetime. And I liked him very much because he's a guy that worked himself up the hard way, really the hard way. And yet he was so involved in issues. He was a master of the issues. And, people criticized him for not having a college degree. He had a lot of common political sense that was unmatched by anybody. He was great at forging coalitions. I think that his departure from active politics is a loss. I have to say that.
But
it is a loss, and
we just lost Senator Weinberg.
Loretta, where are you?
So, Alan, here's what I will say about the Senate president. Look, obviously, we are firmly planted on opposite sides of the aisle.
Right.
He welcomed me with open arms when I won my election in 2019. He didn't have to swear me in December of 2019. He could have waited to swear me in until January of 2020 with the rest of the legislature. And I'll never forget what he did for me. And he called me and said the people of Legislative District 1 deserve to have a senator representing them. This was a special election. So, I have a lot of love for Senate President Sweeney. And I'll say this, he deserved a better ending than this.
I agree with you.
Is there a way we can get Loretta back?
I just texted her.
There she comes.
Here she comes.
Here she comes.
Hey.
Loretta, we got to get Loretta. This is a critical moment to have her because
I will say on Steve Sweeney, one of the things I think that hurt him was his final election against Ed Durr, is that he didn't take it seriously. And I think that was a death blow in a way, in that you need to always take it seriously against it. We're in a time where grassroots matter. Door to door and things like that. Every election is local.
Well, that's true. Let's get Loretta. What it says, iPhone Loretta. Is there? We got to get Loretta on for this. We got to get Loretta on for everything, but somehow, due to high technology, she's suspended. See what you can do. That it says she's there, but she's not there. So Julia, thus far, that is an incredible number of counties. Oh, there she is. Loretta, we
Yay.
had to have you for the Steve Sweeney tribute.
You're on
Because you
mute.
worked so closely and effectively with him. Go ahead. Boy, of
Okay.
all the times for the system to break down when Loretta's in the middle of a meaningful tribute. Go ahead, Loretta.
Yes, I would. Can you? Everything is working now momentarily.
Yeah, now
We're
you're
good.
live.
Okay. I was the majority leader, having been chosen for that position by Steve Sweeney, who is the Senate president. And as I like to point out, all of the kind of progressive legislation that I was given credit for that had my name on it, everything from marriage equality to non-disclosure agreements to improving laws around sexual harassment, you name it, I wouldn't have gotten any one of those bills passed into law had it not been for Steve Sweeney. So I think he has been consistently and constantly underrated as a really good politician, as somebody who really knows how to build coalitions. He kept a very diverse caucus together. And how that happened with Ed Durr taking his eye off what was going on locally is still a shock to a lot of people's nervous system, but it wasn't good for New Jersey. I think
No, it wasn't.
of the 6 candidates in the field, he is the one who could have walked into that office tomorrow and know how to run the state of New Jersey to everyone's advantage.
I felt that we had him as a guest on a podcast. He had like an encyclopedic knowledge
Mm-hmm,
of New Jersey politics and government. I mean,
yeah.
I sat there, I'm known to be somewhat voluble, but man, when he was talking, I felt like a
Mm-hmm.
student. And I'd been in government and politics for a long time, but I think Michael said it all when he gave that tribute. Are we having a difficulty with Julia now? I have her name,
No,
but
I think she had to step off for something.
Oh, okay, that's fine. That's fine. But that is, he deserved to go out a better way than this. But
Yeah,
he
yeah.
wanted to make the run, and you couldn't take that away from him because he was always sitting back in favor of someone else making the run.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess he felt that this was his, this was his. Oh, there she is. That this was his time, and it's sad. And he was also a marvelous father, family, to his daughter with Down syndrome. His narrative I found very compelling. I really did, but unfortunately, he represented the smallest area of the state, and the only guy that really overcame that in South Jersey was Jim Florio. But that happens once in a blue moon, So that was a very difficult thing. But Brian, let's go back and talk about what we're seeing with this breakdown of counties. I think and Julie, I want you to address this too. I think the Democrats have to really be worried as to how good their infrastructure is. Going into the fall election, regardless of Cheryl's merits or demerits, I think this is a problem for them.
They absolutely, they didn't do a good job of getting out the vote. They're not good at messaging, quite frankly.
They're much better at infrastructure than message, actually, in my view.
Republicans, and all kudos to the senator, Republicans are great at messaging. They know how to break through to people in all socioeconomic classes. And, just look at the increase in registration for Republicans in the past year, I guess, or so far this year. Tens of thousands of new Republicans, and Democrats are losing in 20 out of 21 counties, I think, if I remember that number right that I saw earlier today. So when you talk about the challenge for Democrats, right there, you have to begin with messaging. And if the machine isn't there, I mean, the machine hasn't always been there. When I first came to New Jersey, Republicans were in control. They had the governorship.
What was that like?
You were still
I
a
was
baby
there.
in diapers back.
It was pre-Trump. I was a Republican then, and when Trump came, I switched parties. So
And yeah,
now I've had wins and losses in both parties.
you well know, you remember those
I
days.
remember it very well.
And the Democrats managed to put it together. I don't think Bush 2 helped them very much, Republican Party.
Well, I have to say that, even though I served in his
You served
administration.
under him. Yes, you did. And so we saw this swing, and maybe the pendulum is swinging back now. But again, to me, if Democrats can't come up with the right messaging, yeah, Republicans will win the governorship. I'm not sure they'll. Sorry, Senator, I'm not sure they'll win the Senate and the House Assembly, because that's a much harder lift. But certainly the governorship is definitely in trouble.
They would need to pick up 13 seats in the assembly. I don't see that happening. I think they could do very well and picking up some seats, but to pick up 13 seats is a miracle in my view.
Of course, they were supposed to pick seats the last time around too, and they didn't.
Yeah, no, that's I think the Democrats. But Julia, what do you have any more assembly? I'm curious about Loretta's district. I mean, she's been a towering figure in that district. I can't believe that the incumbent Democrats are going to lose there.
Okay. I did not look it up most recently. Give me a second and let's see where we're at.
All right,
Which district are you looking for?
Loretta
30,
Wexler,
37.
Yeah,
That's what I call
right now
retired
the incumbents,
senatorial courtesy.
I'm
Okay,
so
go
sorry.
ahead.
Right now, the incumbents are ahead in 37.
Okay.
The incumbents are okay.
Yeah,
they're
so
probably home free.
Park and Hyder, who are the endorsed incumbents, are ahead. The districts where I saw that the endorsed were not ahead were a combination of districts where the Democrats didn't really have a very good chance in the general. So like the 39th,
Mhm.
the 1st, the 9th, and the 10th. And then the big thing is the 31st and 32nd, which are heavily Democratic, where you have those three candidates that I mentioned that you have upsets.
But that wasn't a full-up challenge in those districts, was
One
it?
of them was, yeah.
Which
Jerry
one?
Walker.
Tomato is the Dems for Change, so that is a full-up
Right.
candidate. Brennan and
And-
Bala are not.
Jerry
But
Walker also is.
I sometimes wondered whether he hurt himself by having these challenger slates. People have mentioned that to me, like he boycotted certain of the conventions. Loretta made a very emphatic and well-positioned point about the conventions. Yet he didn't go to some of the conventions. I think it hurt him. I really do. But go ahead, Julie.
No,
What
that
else?
I was just saying that those are the three upsets.
So give us the current breakdown of
What happened? Which one is the district with Sacco and Stack?
Good question.
That would be 33.
And who's leading there?
It's Rodriguez and Weinstein.
So that's the
Stack.
Stack people.
Yeah.
And
Well, I'll tell you, I sat for a couple of years, sat next to Brian Stack at the Judiciary Committee meetings. And he would sit there with a long legal pad in blue color, and he'd have lists of names on there. And he would make calls. I'd hear him making calls. Mrs. Smith's front stoop needs to be fixed. Please go over there. Mrs. Jones is missing the screen in her third floor window. And I used to kid him when I retire, I was going to move to Union City because I wouldn't have to worry about my kids taking care of me because Brian Stack would. But he literally was involved with his constituents almost daily, one by one.
He had the best constituent service, according to many people in the state.
Fantastic.
he told me, Loretta, he told me, I think in his first campaign for mayor or something, and I was covering him for some god awful reason. I don't know why. I was covering a race in Union City, but I was. And he told me then he wanted his only aspiration was to be mayor for life of Union City, mayor for life. And then he found out he could run for the Senate too, and
and still be mayor for life.
But that gave him more power because of senatorial courtesy. I'm amazed that I think senatorial courtesy is the most powerful tool in a senator's kit. Particularly a smart senator is not going to abuse it.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one thing. I don't say he abused it, but I remember the late Lee Laskin when he was the second. He was blocking everybody. I mean, it was incredible back in the late 1970s. Everyone was getting a block. But Julia, your coverage of the assembly races is really phenomenal. But I wonder what that portends. I think that I'd like to hear from everyone on this. I think that the Democrat chairs, when they were going to be happy that Mikey is one, but I think that there's going to be some real concern, not so much about her, but going forward into the fall as to their message, as to their infrastructure. I think the Republican chairs, and I'm no longer in that party, but I think they're going to wake up happier tomorrow than the Democrat chairs are. I'd like to hear from all of you on that. Loretta, you go first.
Well, I felt that if the Republicans were smart enough, I knew they weren't, but if they were smart enough to nominate John Brownneck, he would be the next governor of the state of New Jersey. I think Chitterelli and I guess I understand why, but I think it'll be a major down drag on him that with the Trump endorsement.
Mhm.
I think that will be used against him in New Jersey, which, when it comes right down to it, is kind of a middle of the road leaning toward blue state. And they don't like extremists in one end or the other. So that's, and of course, I'm not a member of the Republican Party, and we'll see what
I'm really
happens.
surprised at that.
So I think Mikey is going to have to work on building some coalitions here. Bergen is in Josh Gottheimer's corner, which was a tribute to the fact that that convention endorsed him. And if, in fact, Union and Essex are in Baraka's corner, if that holds up through the night, then I guess they're going to have to do some bridge building around here in terms of selling her candidacy.
She
Brian,
hasn't
what do
picked
you
a
go
lieutenant
ahead,
governor
Julia?
yet.
What do you think?
I'm sorry, Julia.
She
What?
hasn't picked a lieutenant governor yet. Maybe, maybe one way to bring him together with a progressive wing is to pick someone like Baraka.
Mhm.
Mm.
I don't know if Baraka would want it though.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I think if she loses this fall, Baraka is he assumes superstar status. I think he's one of the big winners tonight. I really
Agree with
think
that.
so. I mean, go ahead, Brian.
I would agree with that, but let me quote Jack Chitterelli tonight. I doubt Senator
Well, we
Tessick.
better start quoting him. He's going to be in our face for the next 6 months.
Jack Chitterelli tonight. Quote, if this campaign were a drinking game and you took a shot of booze every time Mikey Sherrill says Trump, you're going to be drunk off your ass every day November 4th.
He certainly has a common touch.
And it's probably accurate.
Yes, I'm sure it is. That's it's hard to say in New Jersey. I mean, that is going to play in a lot of voters' minds, and yet affordability, so is housing, so is education. And that just shows you the kind of split in New Jersey that they do care about local issues and they care about national issues.
Absolutely.
So if you're an independent and the independents will control this race, where is your head at? Is it at Trump or is it at taxes? And how many times have we heard that taxes are going to be lowered?
I'm going to get to the taxes in a minute.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Michael. You were. I want to hear from you.
Look, I think that the Republican Party has all of the major issues and therefore has the wind in its sails when it comes to the real issues. Look, Donald Trump is not on the ballot. And look, Mikey Sherrill's going to do her absolute best to put Donald Trump on the ballot. But what really is on the ballot are all of the failed Democrat policies for the state of New Jersey. Again, Alan, I love Ronald Reagan. His question, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? I have to ask people, are you better off today than you were 8 years ago? Because every Democrat in the state supported and endorsed and put their stamp of approval on every single one of Murphy's policies. As a Republican, I get asked questions all of the time about federal issues. They'll say, hey, Testa, are you ready to renounce and denounce President Trump in this decision? And I say, I'm a state legislator from the first legislative district. Look, I was President Trump's co-chairman in 2020. Obviously, I believed in his candidacy in 2016, in 2020, and 2024. However, he's not on the ballot. Those aren't his policies. And look, I get it, the Medicaid issue, and I've already addressed
That
that.
puts them on the ballot, though. The Medicaid issue and also the tariff issue, that involves a burden on middle-class taxpayers. That puts Trump on the ballot. And that's why I'm not making a prediction about this fall until I see what the outcome is of those two issues. And like I said before, if Trump wins those fights, I think Chitterelli loses, because you are getting all over the country now, uprising in the street on the Medicaid issue, on the tariff issue, and New Jersey's part of the nation. You'll keep winning, but I think that would do. I think that would be the best news that the Sherrill campaign could get, and the worst news that Chitterelli could get.
I think what's going to really hurt in New Jersey, and I think it's a Democrat policy that they have to wear, is the energy policy. When it gets hot in July this summer and in August this summer, and people are starting to see their bills, that is an absolute great Republican issue. We're going to talk about, you say national issues are trickling into the state of New Jersey. You're going to see what the cost of illegal immigration has cost the state of New Jersey. And I guarantee you all of the footage that you are seeing, maybe not on MSNBC or CNN, but the footage that you're seeing on Fox News of what's been happening.
I love you, Michael, but you're never going to get me to watch Fox. I'm sorry.
And that's okay. Again, and we're still able to break bread together. Imagine that.
Except for the NFL games.
But, you see all of this footage of these quote unquote peaceful protests that are occurring out there that, if I were running the Chitterelli campaign, I would call it the Summer of Love Part 2, because this is exactly what's happening. It's a repeat of 2020. And I hope that it stops, but if it doesn't, that only puts, more wind in the sails of the Chitterelli campaign. We don't want to be the California of the East Coast. And
I'm delighted you're here tonight because
excuse me, but I grew up in California. I'm a proud graduate of the University of California. And so I think I brought the California experience to my life in New Jersey. So I don't mind seeing New Jersey look a little bit like California as we compete for the movie industry and various other things.
How about the rolling brownouts, Loretta? You gonna be happy when that happens?
The what? I'm sorry.
The rolling brownouts when you.
I would love to have the two of you on a debate about California. It would. Okay. I would produce it. It would be so fantastic.
Look, movies aren't even in California really anymore. It's Georgia, New Jersey. They're not really being made in California. On that specific topic, I will agree with Loretta 100%.
Well, I'll tell you this. I love California for giving us Loretta Weinberg. I hate California for stealing the Brooklyn Dodgers, and I'm never going to forgive them for that. That's just. I see Brian nodding his head. He understands the compelling role that sports plays in my life and in the life of the United States of America. But I want to segue into something else. I don't know how many people will agree with me on this. There wasn't really any sharp issue divides in either party in this campaign. It was almost a non-issue campaign. Now, the thing is, though, for example, taxes. Every election, taxes were a big issue. I think people have come to the conclusion that there really is no solution for high property tax unless you really cut education expenditure. And the overwhelming majority of the public, even Republicans, don't want to do that. Okay. I think
if I could chime in, I think that there's actually a bias in polls that people want to sound really intelligent, and they think that they're supposed to think that taxes are a serious issue and that they're supposed to really care about it. Look, I'm one of those individuals. I'm a fiscal conservative, no doubt. I don't like seeing increased taxes, especially when you don't see anything that your taxes are necessarily paying for. You think about the gas tax in the state of New Jersey. We should have the finest roads in the United States of America. We do not.
Except for one thing about the gas tax. Let me just interject this. Thanks to the gas tax, we were able to really reduce the tax on senior citizens in the state. And I'm a beneficiary of that. For example, part of my income is Social Security and pensions. I don't have to pay any taxes on that. That's the
Alan,
one thing
listen,
I'm
even
grateful.
someone like Grover Norquist, even someone like
I
Grover
know Grover.
would say that the gas tax and what it did was not a net tax increase, so therefore it wasn't bad for New Jersey. My issue
It's
is
good for New Jersey.
all of that money that's getting charged with the gas tax should be going to infrastructure, and I'm not. And
I
in
agree with you
South
on that.
Jersey, I'm not seeing it.
No, I agree. I agree with you on that. But the big issues seem to be affordability. And even though, and Gottheimer was kind of, he introduced the issue, but he was kind of late with that. So we have issues like I think affordability going forward. I'm sure Chitterelli is going to be a big issue. But how do you feel about? I'd like to ask the four of you. How do you feel that the issues really were not that prominent in this primary, in my view? Let's start with
Alan.
Loretta, actually, if
Okay.
if I might.
I think you touched on it, Alan. I can't name one issue that separated any of these candidates that would come to mind. Certainly not the typical, they're all pro-choice. All of those issues. There was a little bit of a discussion about affordability and about the potential for the increase in energy prices, but there were really no major differences. I couldn't name one.
I hope that changes in the fall election because there are serious issues.
Well,
One reason Michael and I have been friends is we always talk issues. But if you have a campaign that they're not talking issues, it's an empty shell. Julia, what do you think about that? You've been in as Red Barber used to say, you've been in the catbird seat observing all this at the Blaustein School, where my friend Jim Florio was a professor for years. But go ahead, give us.
And Katie Brennan, who looks like might be in
Goes
the
to
New England
Blaustein?
legislature, went to the Blaustein School also. Of
Oh
course,
wow,
the Essex County executive
that'll be
went to
on
the
her mail
Blaustein School.
thesis.
Yeah, we have a lot of alums throughout the New Jersey government. I was just going to say, I think the issue was less about education or healthcare. It was more about reform on the Democratic side. So it was more process and kind of anti-machine change versus any particular issues as we think about them, again, like healthcare or education. So I do think that the divisions were drawn along those lines. Are you a reformer or are you more of the same? Certainly
I'm gonna, if I can just interrupt, then I want to get
sure.
Brian.
No, please go ahead.
No. I want to ask Loretta, how much of the split on the Democratic side is due to I didn't think it was so bad. Maybe it is worse than I thought, between the progressives and the center left in the Democratic Party. Is it an acute split? Is it something that can be, I think it's got to be resolved before November.
Well, I don't think it's an acute split. I think it's interesting what Julia just said about it being more about their reform or anti-reform. Yet it's the reformers who came in second. I mean, if you could pick out anybody as being a part of the machine, the political machine, it would be Mikey, who had the backing
True.
of those big counties. So the so-called reformers, I guess, Baraka and Fulop. Baraka seems to be coming in second, and Fulop more of a distant third.
Yeah,
So yeah, I'm sorry.
No. I
yeah.
cut you off. I'm so sorry, Senator.
So I think that's interesting. I think that I've had some personal issues with what the New Jersey legislature did in terms of closing down things like being able to get public documents easily. I took public differences with my own party on that, and I didn't influence them. I did not influence them on the right
Senator,
side.
I applaud you for that.
issue.
I was against that as well.
Yes, and I'm sorry there weren't more of us
I would have loved
that
to have
voted
seen
no.
a test of the Weinberg bill. I would have saved that bill.
So if I may, I think you're right that they didn't win. But if you look at Baraka and Fulop, because they were the ones who were clearly running on the
Mhm.
reform side, combined, they have 156,000 votes versus Cheryl right now with 242. I think the fact that they split the reform vote is the primary reason they didn't win, that one of them
Mhm.
didn't win. We were talking about this earlier. So, and I think that, it's hard to parse apart all of this. I mean, Mikey's also the only woman running.
Mhm.
She was kind of in the middle of everything, right? She was neither too conservative nor too progressive. So, and I think a lot of people perceived her as the most likely to win. And I think we have a Democratic Party that is desperate to win in November. And so I think there's a lot of factors going into this, but I do think that if Baraka and Fulop hadn't split that part of the vote, you might have had a very different outcome. And again, I
At
think
least much
Spiller ran as
closer.
a progressive too. I'm so sorry. Please go ahead.
No. Your eloquence is winning the day here, but
Okay.
keep going.
Well, the other thing I was going to mention is, and this is a little bit on a different topic, but I think it's really interesting that money did not seem to be a hugely decisive factor. I'm sure
It
you
was
guys saw
important
that.
though.
Well, yes, but Baraka had very little compared to, say,
Mhm.
Spiller
Very strong
or
point.
Gottheimer, and Baraka is doing very, very well.
Mhm.
He
Mhm.
has
He's the star of the
140.
night in my view. But
Yeah.
Brian, you go next. Brian, New Jersey never disappoints. I don't think it disappointed you tonight.
No, not at all. And to
I'll be
Julia,
able to. I will request you as a podcast guest for as long as I live. You're seeing it all.
oh, I'm not touching that one. But Julia had a good point. What she didn't say was this is the most expensive primary in New Jersey history. Uh, what over $100 million I think was spent on this thing, and yet money wasn't a factor. But going to the other point here, as to Democrats getting together, I don't see a problem with that. Where is Baraka going to go? Fulop doesn't really control Jersey City, as we saw with the results tonight.
Absolutely not. Yes.
Baraka does to a certain extent control Newark, but where's he going to go? Is he going to go
But
to?
he's the one that has the initiative. He should have the initiative of being a party uniter,
Yeah,
because if he's able to play a strong role in uniting the party, and if Cheryl loses, boy, is he in solid shape for
Mhm.
the year 2029. I'm
and
really
then
getting ahead of things, as Loretta would say, but nevertheless,
yeah,
I see he's got a lot of incentive to be a uniting factor.
and then I would say also, where's Sean Spiller as the president of the NJEA, the New Jersey Educators Association? Where is he going to go? The NGA is in the, either the legislature is in the hip pocket of the NJEA or vice versa, but they're two clones of each other. So Sean Spiller should not be an issue, and the NJEA should not be an issue. And then you look at Steve Sweeney, except who's Steve Sweeney's patron saint? Your buddy George Norcross. Norcross is a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat. He doesn't, especially if the
He's
legislature.
not so ideological, Norcross, at
No,
all.
but if the legislature is going to stay in the hands of Democrats, the last thing Norcross wants to do is cross the party and go somewhere else. Now,
Oh, he's not going to do that. He's not
if
going to do that.
no, that's what I'm saying. So it's all locked in for Mikey Sherrill, in my
I
opinion.
have seen Norcross, though, and I'm not saying this positively or negatively. I have seen him sit out elections where, he nominally would endorse somebody. He didn't break his neck for Phil Murphy in 2017, put it that way. And, I'm talking now with one of the winners tonight, Mike Testa, because I see, Mike, that you're going to have can you hear me? I want to make sure you can still
I
hear
can
me.
hear you. Absolutely. Yeah.
I think you could hear me if I didn't have a microphone. But Michael, you're a winner tonight because you have a strong relationship with Chitterelli. He's off to a strong start. So as far as the looking at it as a Republican, looking at the Democrats, what is it that you would be most concerned about in terms of something negative in a Republican Party that could cause expectations to fall short?
But look, Bill Spady had made it very clear that he was not going to endorse the Republican candidate. I'll put it more clearly and a finer point to it. When asked if he would endorse the Republican candidate if it weren't him, he was the only one that was non-committal. And in 2021, from his bully pulpit on the radio, he was discouraging Republicans from coming out to vote for Jack Ciattarelli, which is a head scratcher if you're a member of the Republican Party. Look, you just spoke of someone like George Norcross, who's a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, who would not come out and tell Democrats to stay home if he were in a match with Mikey Sherrill in any way. I don't foresee that ever happening.
No, he wouldn't do that, but he made. I don't think he's going to be a negative for Sherrill, but I do know that in some elections, when Loretta would remember this, he had a good relationship with Chris Christie. Okay, he didn't break his neck for Corzine in the year 2009.
Mm-hmm.
I just saw the Barbara Buono reference right there. Yeah,
that came
for sure.
And Julia's right on the money.
But look, in 2021, 750,000 registered Republicans stayed home on election day. That can't happen. I mean, so what I think the Republican Party really needs to do is show that they're the big tent, bring in people to support Jack Ciattarelli's candidacy. He's our candidate. As of right now, he's our candidate. He's going to be our candidate, and we need to rally around him to get a Republican win in November. That's what this is all about. I got to go, to use sports analogies, I got to meet Coach Dick Vermeil a few times.
The Eagles and the Rams, yes.
Yeah, at a number of dinners. And when he said he was in his Super Bowl for the Rams, he was very nervous. And I forget who he said called him and knew that he had been very nervous about the upcoming Super Bowl because he was still somewhat reeling from his loss against the Oakland Raiders in 1980, I believe, Super Bowl, 1981. And the coach said to Dick Vermeil, he said, "Coach, you have to remember the main thing is the main thing." And that's winning, right? And he was thinking about all these small things, the small stuff. He was sweating the small stuff. And I think as Republicans, we have to focus on the main thing being the main thing, and that's electing a Republican governor in November.
Well, you're off to a strong start, but as the final issue of the evening, and this is an issue that I think both parties have a problem with. You've got a Democratic Party that has a strong following among women and college-educated voters. They are losing big time among men voters, and they are also losing among non-college educated, which explains a lot of the problems they have, excuse me, with the working class Democrats, okay, who have become MAGA Republicans in many cases. Mm-hmm. The Republican Party is attracting a majority of men, but they are really, in my view, they have lost a lot of support among college-educated voters, and among women voters, they're really behind the eight ball. I'd like to hear first from you, Mike, and then Loretta, what your respective parties can do about what I feel is a reverse gender gap in both parties.
Reverse gender gap?
Yeah, and in this sense, because the Republicans have a gender gap with regard to men, and with regard to women, and the Democrats have a gender gap with regard to men. Perhaps that was an inartful way of word usage on my part, but in other words, their gender gaps are reverse of each other. But I think at times that can hurt each party.
It certainly can. I mean, look, we still have as a Republican Party a massive registered voter disadvantage. It's not lost on me that what the name of your podcast is right now, Alan. The folks
deliberate.
The folks in the center, the folks in the middle are going to decide this election. Now, my personal opinion, and I admit that it comes with a level of bias being a Senate Republican, is that most people are tired of the 8 years of the Murphy administration. I think that they're worn out. I think, again, the July, August energy costs are really going to affect their wallet. And I think that that's the great unifier when people are feeling that they've been squeezed. I also think that the affordability issues that prevail in the state of New Jersey is sort of the death of a thousand cuts. I think they're looking for something new. And again, I said it earlier in this, in our discussions, I've never heard Mikey Sherrill denounce any of the Democrat policies that are hurting middle-class Americans and middle-class New Jerseyans. I think that someone like Jack Ciattarelli, who served in our assembly, understands probably the state of New Jersey better than Mikey Sherrill, because look, she's down in Washington and she has a lot of explaining to do, with some of those discussions about her, extreme exponential wealth growth since she's been in Congress. I think she has a lot of questions that deserve answers, and the people of New Jersey deserve to hear those answers. So I think that this is a really ripe time for a Republican to win in the state of New Jersey. But that's my opinion.
But in support of what you're saying, here's where I definitely agree with you. Every 8 years since 1993, there has been a change of party. I think people in New Jersey get dissatisfied after 8 years of a party. It's just a habit. For example, Christy Whitman won in 93. 2001, Jim McGreevey won. 2009, Chris Christie won. And then after those 8 years, Phil Murphy won. So this is the end of an 8-year cycle. And that's not insignificant, because I think voters do want to change. But Loretta, what is your feeling, both as to what I feel is the Democrat gender issue as opposed to the Republican one, and in terms of after 8 years, do people want to change? Go ahead, Loretta. I'm sorry.
Well, I think the second part of your question about people wanting to change at the end of 8 years, as much as I might not like it, I have to agree with a large part of what Mike said. I think the Republicans under Ciattarelli are starting out in as good a condition as a Republican can start out in the state of New Jersey. In terms of the gender gap, I don't think that, I think you're talking more national issues than perhaps in New Jersey. I don't know that that kind of a gap exists in New Jersey. I think having a woman running as governor will help solidify the women's vote, because she also stands for the issues that are most important to us, like access to health care for our families. Although I will tell you, I had somebody say to me this afternoon that she heard someone was nervous because they wouldn't know that Mikey Sherrill is a woman because of her name. So
Her real name is Rebecca, I think. That's okay.
is it? Yeah, I did. Well, that's something new I learned tonight too. But so I thought that was funny that they were worried that they were glad that her ad said something about being a mom of 4, so that it would clarify that she was a woman. I was not worried about that. But so I don't know that we have that kind of a gender gap in New Jersey. I think we hear that nationally. I think we have a little ways to go to solidify behind one candidate, i.e., what the kind of vote patterns that Julia is presenting to us. If Raj Baraka won 2 big counties, I think that's news that the Democratic Party is going to have to digest and figure out why and how, so that we can all coalesce. But we want a Democrat elected. I know that to play into Jack Ciattarelli's statement about Trump, I don't want Donald Trump anywhere near New Jersey. And anybody who welcomes him here is not my idea of a good leader for our state. So let me be the first to use his name in this campaign, and I'll be continue doing it.
I use his name negatively all the time. So Loretta,
well, and also we're helping to lead a rally on Saturday, no, King's Day. We're going to have one right here in Teaneck and at our municipal green, to send a message to the little soldier who's watching the parade, that he put together money that could better be used to help more people have access to health care than to ruin the streets of Washington, D.C. So I think Jack Ciattarelli is going to have a lot to live down there, too.
I wonder if he's going to go to that rally. I'm not that rally, but if he's
You mean
going to
the
go
parade?
yeah, the parade. I wonder if he's going to go. That
I
might
would,
not be a wise move.
I would assume it won't be.
Yeah, but politicians don't always do the wise moves. Julia and then Brian, I want to talk about that. Julia, you may have, I don't know if you have any statistics on men and women in the vote in New Jersey. You see those on national TV shows all the time. But Loretta makes a solid point. I think that should be looked at in New Jersey. My impression is it's pretty much that same way throughout the country, but I don't know for certain.
I don't have any statistics on how voters are voting in terms of men versus women, or what percentage of the primary turnout by gender. I don't have that. I haven't seen anything like that, but that's actually a great question. I will look into it.
Yeah, you and I will we'll talk further. By the way, before I get to Brian, Ray Lesniak, over the years, I started off adversarial to him. He became one of my closest friends in life. I can't wait to call him tomorrow morning about Union County. I cannot wait for that call. I mean, and Ray can be very colorful in describing things. Ray, if you're watching, I'm going to call you. We're going to have our lunch because, man, I want to hear what you have to say about Union County. But go ahead, Brian.
You know, we don't know really how to measure this. I know Loretta's hopeful on the Democratic side. Senator Testa is hopeful on the Republican side, that they both have a lot of wind in their sails. There are a lot of issues in New Jersey, but one thing I can't get out of my head is the Trump effect.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go back to 2016, when Trump won the election, and then go forward to 2017, when New Jersey had legislative elections, the Democrats, with all the publicity about Trump, the Women's March on Washington had happened, all that sort of stuff, Democrats picked up 2 seats that year in the legislature, in the assembly. So now we have Trump winning again. The question will be that, again, local issues versus federal, state issues, whatever. I mean, you can talk about Medicaid cutbacks and whatever, but I think, Trump is a personality. He's a transactional person. He really doesn't have any issues that he really cares about except winning. Which is,
and also he cares about his opportunity to grift, and he cares about making money now out of crypto. Those things he cares about. But go ahead.
So he's made $1.3 billion in the last 3 or 4 months. Okay, so who's counting? But that being said, you have to understand Trump.
I'm going to have to interject there. I think he cares about the United States of America. I think he cares about the massive amounts of illegal immigrants that have come into this country and are a danger to our society at large. I mean, to say that, he doesn't care about anything, I think is just completely unfair. I mean, you can argue that he's an imperfect person, but I think he truly cares about the United States of America.
I think you truly care about the United States of America. But the question is, what are his priorities? His highest priority.
I would love to have a debate. I would love to have a debate.
We could get myself and Loretta, but Mike doesn't have as good a partner as I would have with Loretta. Mike, there's very few Republicans who can defend this guy as eloquently as you can. So you start off at the last. Julia, you have to leave, but I thank you so much for your participation tonight. This really, the data you brought out and the information you brought out is vital, not only to podcasters and journalists, it's vital for the whole public to know. So I'll be calling you as a follow-up because you've been a terrific asset to this podcast, and tonight was a most interesting night. So God bless you. And now I know you're headed over to another newscast, so have fun over there. But we can say we had you first.
Yeah, and Julia, thank you very much. You really bring a lot of clarity to what is a confusing jumble of numbers.
You are always so kind, Senator.
So, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Rubin. Appreciate you.
Yes.
Thank you. You too.
We have Dr. Rubin, we have Dr. Yaris. Actually, Michael and I have law degrees, but we're not supposed to call ourselves doctor, although I think that's unfair.
It is very unfair.
I agree.
We're Jewish doctors, but If one of my best friends is a chiropractor. If he's allowed to call himself a doctor, I think those of us with law degrees should be allowed to.
I heartily concur. But go ahead, Brian. You've covered a lot of elections, but you're going to remember tonight as kind of not a shocker, but as a surprise.
Yeah, and I think the surprise is how dispersed the Democratic Party is. I still believe the Democrats will come together. Whether they'll win or not the governorship, I'm not convinced of. I think, Senator Testa has a lot of insight as to Republican possibilities there. But that being said, this is historic. We now have a female nominee for governor. I know Loretta hopes she doesn't end up like Hillary did 11 years ago or whenever it was. I'm losing my math here. 9 years, I guess. But that being said, that's historic. I think you have in Chitterelli somebody who, if he can bridge the Trump wing of the party and what's left of the moderate wing of the party, which was represented by John Bramnick, then and go for those independents in doing so, get that, then he has more than a good chance of becoming the next governor. If Democrats can't unite, take a shot every time Mikey Sherrill says Trump, I think that is going to happen. Because she's got to drive that home to the independents and drive up the Democratic turnout, which wasn't there 4 years ago when Murphy beat Chitterelli by just 80,000 votes, I think it was.
77,000. Yeah.
Well, you're counting. I'm not.
And who's counting?
He knows those stats. If he followed baseball, he would win every single one of those matchups.
I learned by watching Brian Stack. I'll tell you that.
Well, you can't learn from a better source than that. Okay.
So
go ahead, Brian.
That's where I think we are right now. I think both sides have their work cut out. I don't think Bill Spadea brings a lot of it takes a lot of voters away from Chitterelli. I would
agree with that.
I think they're very, very gettable on Chitterelli's part. And I think all of the Democrats are very, very gettable on Mikey Sherrill's part. So then what you're going to get down to is messaging, and do voters
and
independents especially, are they more upset about Trump? Are they more upset about where they see New Jersey going? And don't forget, the Democratic Party nationwide is down in the dumps right now. So
this is why I think I'll tell you one thing that may emerge out of California. I think the Democrats want a leader who will really take the fight to Trump. They want a fighter. And I think that they were impressed with Gavin Newsom over the last few days, really going at Trump, saying, hey, tough guy, come after me. Mm-hmm. That's what I think they want to hear. I don't think they're looking so much for eloquence as they are looking for a fight. Loretta, what do you think of that?
I think, they said that Gavin Newsom went up in the polls because of the way he's taken on Trump in the last few days. My kids live in Los Angeles, and they have plenty of complaints about life in California. So I'm well aware of it. I see it when I go out and visit there. So, yeah, he's been a great spokesperson and a great perceived fighter against Trump. So I think that's the biggest thing that Chitterelli is going to have to live down is Donald Trump. I think he starts off in a really good place for a Republican nominee for governor. And I think the 8-year fatigue is definitely there. And we'll see how far he can take it.
That's a good saying, 8-year fatigue. This has been a fantastic show, and it's not due to me. I had an all-star panel tonight. I got to thank each one of you. Brian, yeah, we're never going to let you retire from New Jersey politics.
Brian, it was great to see you. I haven't seen you in a while, so it was great.
Oh, man,
thank you.
He keeps the interest alive, okay?
Yeah.
Loretta, you were absolutely, you demonstrated tonight why your success, not only in terms of formulating legislation, but your very deep understanding of the politics at stake. You cannot be successful as a legislator unless you understand the politics that gets things done. And you were a marvelous spokesperson for Bergen County, and I hope to get you out back on this podcast again. I'll be a pain in your neck because you add a lot to this podcast.
I'll look forward to it. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you so much. And Michael, it's wonderful how our friendship has survived, but it survives because I got a lot of respect for you because
You.
I've been very
And
critical.
ditto.
I appreciate that, but I've been very critical of the Republican Party in terms of the racial issues. You don't have a spot of racism within you, and nor do you have any misogyny within you. Unfortunately, a lot of your kinsmen in the party, I feel, do, which is why I left. But I think you would someday make a very effective governor, and I think that you will be a super asset if Chitterelli wins. I don't know if you'd want to be in the cabinet or not, but if you were, you would do an excellent job. You would be a great state treasurer, for example. He could do a lot worse than having Mike Testa as his state treasurer. See, I'm already putting rumors out there. But yeah, your knowledge of policy and politics, and the fact that you were a success both as a senator and as a state chair, as a county chair, that's a unique combination. And I thank you so much. You could have been at Chitterelli's headquarters while watching people drink, I guess, is the way that Brian would have.
I was getting a lot of text messages, I have to say. That's why if you saw me looking down a few times, I was my friends who were there were texting me. I have to plead guilty to that.
Multitask, and you multitask very efficiently. And Doc, the way you produce these shows is excellent. We have the finest productions out there. We have the best visual effects, and this has been a great night. And Doc, I'm already getting you started. We're going to do an election night special like this too. So I thank you for all of you for doing this inaugural election special. It's been a great night. And Brian, I think I'll use the words of Michael Aaron. New Jersey never disappoints. And you know what? If you understand the politics like Loretta, you're always relevant. All of you are always relevant. So thanks to all of you. That concludes this broadcast.
Thank you.
I'll close with the words of Tom Kane. New Jersey and you perfect together. And if you're in politics, New Jersey is always perfect for you, even if you don't like the outcomes. Thank you so much, and have a great evening, and we'll be talking.
Thank you.
That concludes this broadcast of the Voice of Dynamic Political Centrism.